Hey gamers, welcome to another episode of Bonus XP. Today I'm here with Mecha and Actual Lizard, and we're talking about Fire Emblem Awakening. Guys, I want to say welcome back to the show. I really appreciate you both being here again.
Yo, what up?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again.
I'd like to think at some capacity, like someone might say, what else could you possibly say about the Fire Emblem series? And yet here we are, and I have a feeling we're going to say some pretty interesting things about this game and possibly toss some hot takes out there too based on some of the things we've already talked about in previous episodes. So here we go, talking more about it. Where does Awakening land for you all, just to kind of get like a temperature check on how much you like it and how well you think it's received by people?
I enjoyed playing Awakening again when I recently got back to it. It's still not my favorite, but I do really like it.
Yeah, I would say for me, in my list of Fire Emblem games, it's probably around like the middle, maybe lower middle. Yeah. But I like all of the Fire Emblem games, so compared to any other game, that's still pretty high.
Yeah, I feel like this is a high interest game in terms of design, especially when we saw such a huge design pivot from, like, stylistically and visually from the rest of them, jumping on the 3DS, trying something new. To me, I know we've talked about this before. I feel like this is where we get very heavily into trope emblem and whatnot. But I still think it did some really cool things that were later escalated into refined, polished mechanics. I know when I was talking to Speedy and Bopper about dual strikes and pair-ups, that was a big bulk of the conversation. But it started here, for better or for worse. And I kind of want to let you guys take a few chunks at both the pair-up and dual strike mechanics, because I think those are probably like the biggest features of what's going on in this game.
Yeah, the random mechanics in Awakening that they refined in Fates, like they were basically just biorhythm but worse in a way as far as like reliable combat is concerned. But obviously the pair-up system itself has a ton of strategic value to make the game very interesting. Just the way different classes and different characters give different bonuses and how you can use those to augment someone's weaker stats or their stronger stats to make them overkill powerful is super nice. The way it's kind of like Rescue Plus in a way too, where instead of making someone weaker, it makes someone stronger by carrying around someone else, which I thought was too good to be true when I first played the game, so I didn't understand how it worked until I realized, okay, it actually is that good. It really just is Rescue Plus. But it's very interesting. There's no real drawbacks to pairing up in Awakening. That's kind of the whole point of the game. And it's also part of the fun of the game. And it's also where it kind of falls apart sometimes. But overall, it was definitely nice to have, again, something new that the Fire Emblem series likes to do, is just experiment with something new. And pair up is one of those things. And for what it tried to do, I think the first shot at it was pretty good. And that was what you asked, like, right? Pair up, right? That's it.
Yeah, pair ups to do, and like when they are paired up, the potential for the striking. I know dual strike is a little different when we're considering Fates and how they kind of refined it there.
Yeah, and I was just random chance to attack again. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I like pair up in Awakening. I prefer what they did with dual strike and dual guard in Fates, but I do think the stat bonuses from pairing up are pretty interesting, especially in the early game. I did a playthrough recently, and I was reminded how in the early game those pair-ups are really important, where you think about like who's getting your speed pair-ups, who's getting your defense pair-ups, and I think that's kind of fun. So I enjoy that aspect of it, and I thought it was a good baseline for them to improve upon in Fates.
Wait, you don't just ship them based on canonical relationship?
Well, that too. Do we get it now to the romantic part?
Yeah, we can totally jump into that. I mean, we're free flowing. We'll go wherever the wind takes us, even if it takes us back.
Yeah, I'm not one of the players who likes to ship. No one who has ever heard me talk is going to be surprised by that. But it's funny. Like, it's a funny mechanic to me, and I appreciate what it does for other fans. And in that sense, it was a huge success, right? Everyone really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I find it interesting when we're talking about like shipping and how much it matters in this game, because probably since FE4, this like we are returning with kids, and personally, with the 3 games that have like offspring in it, I think like plot wise, well, I wouldn't say plot wise this is the best, because I think 4 does a good job with it really well, but I feel like this one, Awakening, also does a really good job I didn't really like how fates work. Your kids live in this other world where, when you finally get into a relationship, you just kind of go into their world and pull them out of it and their hijinks. Like, I think this one did a good job of, trying to tell a story of past and present, and how, if your characters die, they don't have kids. So why would the kids come from the future to help out? I thought that was kind of interesting, even with just the take of Lucina. I feel like they made it pretty obvious with what was going on, but it was a nice little narrative point. I thought that was kind of exciting.
I was so happy. I'm too oblivious to catch these obvious things to other people by myself, because I did not see it coming at all for some dumb reason. But yeah, I really appreciated that Well was integrated within the story. Even though time travel is always going to be a mess, it made sense within the game itself for the most part. As long as you kind of close your eyes halfway through, it was kind of fine.
Yeah, I liked the children units in this game. I like the, I wouldn't say I'm super into shipping, but I like romance stories, so having so many options to S support is fun for me. My only real complaint with the children units is I feel like I don't end up using them that often. This was also something that was slightly improved upon, or this specific thing was improved upon quite a bit in Fates. But you get the children at, like, what, level 10?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Potentially pretty late into the game. Which
it varies heavily depending on the child. I feel like someone like Lucina and Morgan are
they're fine
from like some other kids,
or like Shell, you get pretty early, but like some of them you get pretty late and they're not that high of a level. Which means I just don't use a lot of them. And then in Fates they kind of fixed that with the offspring seal. But overall, this was a mechanic I liked in Awakening.
Yeah, I was curious actually. I wanted to ask because I'm heterosexual, so for me the pairing system works the way my life works, if you think about it, but I imagine that's not the case for all of us here. So does that change anything for you guys?
It does a little bit, especially when you think of Fates, where the only like homosexual pairing that you can do if you're a male is Niles.
Yeah.
And like you don't get a kid, like you just flat out don't. And I don't always like having to play a female character just to be able to romance a man, because it's kind of like, we talk about this whenever we do an episode on things like Stardew Valley or Baldur's Gate, where they say they include queer romances, but it's really just the dialogue that you would see if you were a female character. So I mean, like, a lot of games don't do it right anyway. But I mean, for the most part, I mean, like, I can get into picking a girl and just being like, oh, she's cute, I'll just go with her. I know what you mean, but so like there's that like general frustration of it, like, okay, like it would be nice, but it especially in a game like this, and we're talking about birthing children, it doesn't really work like that. So it's fine.
Yeah, I would say for me, I'm bisexual. So it's not like I can't relate to the relationships in the game, right? Like,
you have the whole damn pool.
but I do think it's something I like better in more recent entries that do have a few more gay options. That I like it when those are available. So I would say it's not like a problem for me in Awakening, but it's like slightly disappointing that there's not some more options there, I guess.
When it comes down to it, I'm just female Robin riding the Vake wave.
The sentiment I sometimes see online, I think by other queer people, is something along the lines of, well, we live in a fantasy world with dragons and magic and etc. But the one thing they can't do apparently is do reproduction between two people of the same gender. Is that something you guys agree with? As a way of jokingly stating what's wrong with it, basically, right?
No,
right.
I've definitely heard that argument before, especially when like Priam comes up.
Oh yeah.
But I've always thought that we don't even need magic to explain that. I mean, gay people have kids in real life. So I feel like it's not too far-fetched for gay people to have kids in Fire Emblem.
I feel like if we had to do it based on Fire Emblem universes, if it's happening anywhere, it's happening in Fates. Like, yeah, we just married each other and somehow spawned a baby in the whatever realm that they exist in now. I feel like it's not gonna make its way into something like Awakening. I mean, I always wish for it, but again, I think it's that authenticity, because again, I think if they truly did it in a game, I just would really hate it if it was the case where like you just totally spliced in what a female protagonist's dialogue would be. in this relationship, because it loses how genuine the relationship can be, and like the difference between a queer relationship versus a heterosexual relationship. So I don't know if a lot of these game developers, especially with how taboo it is to be queer in Japan, have the skill set to do that, you know.
I think they've succeeded with that in some cases. I mean, I know they didn't like officially confirm this until after Three Houses, but like Catherine and Shamir read as pretty queer to me in the text. So I think there are some examples of them doing it well.
It's also like one of the most toxic relationships ever, which I'm not sure.
Yes, it is. But hey, I mean, there's toxic relationships in real life, you know?
Well, and that's fair, because those are characters that you aren't. Like, we're not talking about Byleth, we're not talking about Robin, where you insert yourself in the protagonist role. Those are characters that are predetermined, who already have a narrative, like Heather, you know, and Radiant Dawn. She's already created in a certain way where that fits, and there you can see a lot of that like genuine relationship feel that goes into it. But if it comes to, you know, a player generated character, you don't tend to see that in any capacity in a lot of games.
Well, and I do know what you mean with when sometimes that there are gay options, but the text is just exactly the same. Like, I mean, Engage does that, right? You can S support whoever you want, but it doesn't really feel like a to me at least it doesn't.
They're all like platonic, right? In Engage.
Some of them are romantic.
I use this mechanic a lot, you can tell.
But none of them feel like a real queer story is being told in them, I think, because of that. Because it's just the exact same dialogue either way.
It's actually funny, we joke about this when we talk about Stardew Valley as well, that like if you marry Alex, if you're familiar with the game, he's the guy with the grandparents and he lives with them. I think his grandfather makes an offhanded so you're gay like comments. Like, it's very passive aggressive, hateful. And even though for me it's kind of like ick, and I know the creator of Stardew Valley is very like pro LGBT, but like it's like that's genuine. Like you have this man who's basically a boomer who probably wouldn't feel good about it, so it adds a little bit of authenticity to it, just in a very negative way. All right, well,
that's something I was curious about. I think we got into that enough.
No, I think that's really good, because obviously we can't talk about, you know, this game without talking about the relationships, and you know, I do appreciate your take on that, because, you know, it's a discussion I think a lot of queer folk wish where we saw something like that a lot more, and especially with this sentiment, Mecca, because I know you've talked about several times we've had you on, you hate it when supports is everyone supports everyone. I feel like that also leads into like the whole queerness too, where there's just something really weird about the relationships and how people feel about each other. Where, do you really think these 10 people are all going to be interested in each other? No, it's not very likely that they're all going to marry each other, or they're all going to want to build relationships with each other, especially with their very like highly focused personalities. There's going to be some abrasiveness. So I think it all just kind of like wraps in together.
Yeah, this is the game that started that trend of like almost everyone can support almost everyone. Apparently it's not everyone, but it's almost every dude can support every girl basically, and it doesn't really make the supports work very well.
But yeah,
like not Crom, Sumia, or Crom Cordelia, whatever it is.
Crom Cordelia, isn't an option.
Yeah, and apparently there's a lot more options that don't work that I learned about only recently. But yeah, most of them work.
Yeah, it was like everyone in Fates. It was a lot more than usual in Awakening.
Yeah. Let's talk about some other things in this game, because I know that narratively, I think this is a pretty strong entry. I don't know if that's a bold statement, but I say that in the sense of we have a clear like A to B narrative that's easy to follow. It's not over the top. Mecca, you said you were surprised about the Lucina thing, which is like completely fair. I think story-wise, this is one of the games that lands more toward the top for me, and I wanted to hear what you guys kind of thought about that.
I don't think it's the greatest Fire Emblem story that we've ever had. It's kind of when story critiques of Fire Emblem really talk off. It's really Awakening. I do think it's a step down from Tellius, which is basically its predecessor when you don't count the remakes.
Of course, right. Absolutely. No one's going to argue with you on that.
It goes down. You can go down a long way from how well, especially Path of Radiance did.
Question for you there. Do you think that the reason why is because we jumped systems again, where when you think of console systems, you tend to think like heavy narrative, but then when you jump to something like a handheld, it tends to be more like pick up and play?
I don't know if the size of the console is necessarily proportional to the size of the amount of thought was put into the story. I'm not a gaming expert, but
right.
I feel like you can write good stories on both a small and a big screen if you want to. But maybe I'm missing something. But I remember the general take, the most cold take I think on this story is generally that the first act is decent and the second act is filler. And the last act is, what the hell happened here? All the glue was missing between all the moments. Like there's a lot of dramatic moments in the third act, and then there's no real justification for those. The moments feel a bit unearned to me, and I feel like a lot of the problems that Awakening's, especially late game story, has are very similar to the issues I have with, for example, the Blazing Blade, where they seem to be written towards wanting a bunch of dramatic reveals and twists and emotional impacts on the player, but not really enough build-up, justification, or really, CinemaSins would call them plot holes, but I would just say they were not properly built up towards them. You know what I mean? Like the whole twist was like, oh, he had to fire him all along, but it was actually a fake, and I'm going to summon Grima anyway, stuff like that. That felt like it could have been done better. But it is simple enough to where you can enjoy it if you don't think about it too hard, and that works well enough for most players. It works well enough for me on the first playthrough. But upon further analysis, I think there could have been more to it. I think it could have been better. And I'm not one of those people who thinks that Fire Emblem never has a good story anyway, because I do think Fire Emblem has done better stories than Awakening.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we talked about this when we did the Radiant Dawn and Path of Radiance episode. I would not say that this is like toppest of tier for me, but I think what you're like you said, basically it's serviceable. And to me, because I think a lot of Fire Emblem games are just so bland in story or hit the same note, or especially with some of the more recent entries are really wackadoo out there. I think this one just lands in like a solid B tier for me.
I do have the cold take on this game. Maybe a little more extreme than the way Mecca described it. I love the first arc of this game. Love it. Then the second arc is like filler to me, and the third arc I'm like, okay, I'm ready for the game to be over now. But I love the first arc of this one. And I do agree that, I don't know, I think Fire Emblem can have good stories. I think I like more Fire Emblem stories than I don't like.
There's this weird, I don't want to say it's a misconception, but it feels like Fire Emblem games are often either called bland or over the top and therefore kind of shoddily written. I feel like we've rarely had a game that falls in a sweet middle. The only exception is like Path of Radiance and maybe Radiant Dawn, but even Radiant Dawn gets a lot of criticism. Like, it's almost never that they try very hard and it gets very, very good in almost everyone's opinion, or bland. That's like the only flavor we get. We know what I mean, right?
I would rather have bland personally than crazy over the top nonsensical narrative.
I've never liked bland and I'm not saying you guys are doing this, but I feel like oftentimes people like look at the plot synopsis of a game and call it bland, but it doesn't feel bland while I'm playing it. Like, if you just describe a summary of Sacred Stones, like, it probably sounds pretty bland, but I don't know. I think the characters are interesting. I think it's well executed. It doesn't feel bland while I'm playing it.
Yeah, you can. People often try to like they smash a story down to its most basic elements, put it in a synopsis, like you said, and they're like, country invades country, dragon, and cult happens. That's the way to summarize most of the stories. But you can always distill a story down to some very basic elements and make it sound boring. That doesn't mean that the way they execute it is bad.
Which is true, and I think that's why I tend to lean more toward these coherent plots more for that reason, because kind of what you're saying, like FE7 we talked about, which I mean, like, nothing truly special going on there, but there are some feels. Like, you care about Lynn, you care about her journey, you care about Ninian when she gets killed by Elliewood. You care about some of the little things that happen as you go on. And I think this one too, it's easy enough to follow, and when some of the big things, what's the name of the sister that dies in this one?
What a memorable story was Emerin.
Emerin.
It's because I had to draw her in Scribble.io recently.
I feel like, there are moments in this too where they do a reasonably good enough job with a character where you're saying, if you boiled this down to plot tropes, they're all there. Then they're not just Fire Emblem exclusive. You see them in just a lot of RPGs, but I think there's enough going on here that bland's not the best word for it, but at least coherency wise it's there.
I wouldn't call Awakening bland. Like I said, I think it has a lot of memorable moments. I just think the build-up wasn't proper. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think seeing how it goes in Act 3 is very similar to what you see in a lot of the other Fire Emblems, where maybe the intelligence systems isn't the greatest at their Act 3s, where it tends to be, okay, this is when the true enemy, quotation marks, arrives, and it's just evil being evil. And I don't know if that's always the best way to handle a plot. It just seems like an easy cop-out, but it's also, like we're saying, it's fine.
Yeah, and there's like the total fillerness of the second arc that we already hinted at about. This is living rent-free on my head right now, and I need some answers. What's Grima doing during the second arc? What's everyone doing during the second arc? Like, it feels like they just take a break from handling one country to go invade another, and nothing happens because of it. Like, am I missing something? Why is not that guy Veldar? Why isn't he doing anything?
Don't they want the war to happen?
I guess maybe. I forgot exactly how it went. I think in the end they were happy that Walmart was destroyed. I mean, wouldn't we all?
Walmart.
Yeah, Walmart.
Walmart. The worst villain of them all.
They did lend some ships, didn't they? It's been a while since I read the story full on through. They did lend the ships to help with the invasion. So maybe that is not actually a CinemaSin style plot hole. I just remember how weird I always found it that, like, Act 1, you're going against one enemy, and then Act 2, you're going against the second enemy, and then Act 3, you're going back to the first enemy. It's just kind of weird how there's nothing happening in between you and enemy number 1. But yeah.
I remembered my last playthrough. I remembered feeling like, okay, in Act 1, it kind of feels like every chapter is moving the plot along. And then you get to Act 2, and it feels like at the end, it's like, how much has the plot really advanced in the last 6-7 chapters? And it doesn't feel like a whole lot to me.
Okay. We've talked about plot. We've talked about mechanics and the relationships and stuff and whatnot. I think the last thing I want to talk about, and this is a pretty big thing. Bopper and I have talked about this maybe once off recording, because it always seems like in Awakening there is this one part where map-wise the game completely drops off. And it just kind of becomes an enemy unit shit show.
Yeah.
I guess I kind of want to know where you feel that point is, and how would you fix this game? Again, we're not saying it's so bad or anything like that. Like, it's fine, but on hard mode there is a substantial difficulty spike, and everything just kind of falls apart. But I'll let you guys go ahead and jump in here.
Yeah, that jump, I think, is present on all difficulties. At the very least, everything hard and above. And I've noticed it too. You have like the quintessential... If someone says the quintessential Awakening map, there's like a couple of maps you can think of, and they're mostly just big open maps with almost no terrain to hide on, no hallways, no castle, just a bunch of enemies, and good luck dealing with them. And the way the game is just designed, it just feels like the game just wants you to take like a couple Juggernaut units, put them in enemy range, press end turn, and watch them all fall apart. And that is one of the most fun, but it's simultaneously one of the most boring ways to play a strategy game, because if the strategy is just put yourself in range and kill everything without even doing any inputs, that feels kind of boring. That's what people call an enemy phase-based game, generally speaking, and that can be kind of boring. But it's also exciting because it's a fun power fantasy to have someone you raised from the ground up, especially if it's a child unit, to just have that person slaughter everything because you gave him all the best skills and all the best weapons and everything, all the best supports. You gave him a good support partner. to give them the best bonuses. Like, that works on a certain level. It can be a lot of fun. But if you're doing it for like 5 or 10 maps in a row, it can get a little boring sometimes. I can get that. But it was also one of the most fun parts of my fake playthrough, for example, just watching him slaughter everything one after another.
Quite literally everything.
Yeah, he was basically the only unit I had for quite a lot of the game. Because the other thing that this style of map design does, especially once that power spike hits, before it hits, you can at least like have Vake do like a bit of the map, and then everyone else can kind of gang up on the little enemies around the map, like maybe get some side objectives. But once those side objectives are no longer interesting to you, and once the power spike has surpassed your units by so much, like, what are untrained, semi-promoted units supposed to do? Like, even Frederick was having trouble late in the game, I remember, even though he was very, very, like, good for the first, like, 2/3. But for the last third, even though he got a lot of help, he couldn't really do anything. Part of that was some suboptimal class choices, but the level that a unit requires to be, like the power level they have to be at to even remotely function late in the game is just so much higher, and it becomes way easier to just have them do everything than it is to have them do less and have everyone else do everything. Like, units become liabilities that can be a big part of what makes the game unenjoyable. And this is a problem that a lot of Fire Emblem games have. And in fact, the easiest way to beat most Fire Emblem games is to invest most of your resources into like 1 or 2 units and have them destroy everything. Like, I was talking to Septi about this, and she said, yeah, but you can do that in Conquest too. You can do it in almost every game. It's just in Awakening, it feels like the game is pushing for it more than others. And I think part of that is the map design, the way that the enemies are just so diverse that you can't really rely on fixing your matchups in your favor. You have that lava map where I feel like almost every type of enemy is represented in a small portion of the map. So even if you have weapon triangle over half of them, you're probably bad against the other half.
Sure.
Flyers can't do a whole lot when there's bows enemies just sniping you down all around. So that type of design makes it very tough for a unit to function without being really overstated and really overleveled. And that's not always great, but it sure is satisfying to watch.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that really push the juggernaut in Awakening. Because I do think it's true in most games it's easier to juggernaut, right? Like, if you want to beat FE8 easily, just use Seth. But people don't do it as much in other games. So I think there's something about Awakening's design that kind of encourages that. And I think it's the things Mecha mentioned. Another one is, after the difficulty spike, there's still quite a few ambush spawns in the game. Yeah. So I find when I use weaker units, if I haven't memorized the ambush spawn, sometimes I'll just die. And then I'm like, oh, well, I could have just used Nosferatu Robin and not had to have worried about that. Which results in me low manning maps towards the end of the game. But I do like the early game of Awakening quite a bit.
It seems to be balanced a little bit better, and I'm happy that when we do your charity stream tomorrow, that's where I have. Take it, Mecha, take your time before me, because I'm right after you. So I wonder if a part of it too, since this was their last hurrah revitalization of the series, right? Like, it was Awakening or Bust. Is that right?
The series.
Yeah. So
it wasn't marketing, trust me.
Do you think that it could also be possible that they really wanted you to grind in this game because of how readily available world map encounters are? Like, I know, especially being a very casual Fire Emblem player when this came out still, because I think at that point I'd not gone back through the series. It was like a one and done, beat 7, beat 8, beat Path of Radiance, and just like would put them away once it happened. I know that when it came to my playthrough, if I got a newer character, I would catch them up to everyone else. And I'm wondering if when they designed it around that focus, where they weren't thinking of the players who are going to just pound through chapter after chapter, not really look to the in-between as a space for raising an army.
I think partially they put it in because it was in some other games like Gaiden and Sacred Stones, so they were like, that's one way to harken back to those. Partially it might have been, okay, someone's playing on like normal or hard, they're having trouble, and some of their characters died, so we need to give them a way to grind units up that were not leveled up properly but do need to carry the rest of the way through. Part of it might also just be a way to show off how mean Lunatic and Lunatic Plus are, because if you try to grind in those, you can probably get destroyed because the enemies are just so strong. I also kind of want to subscribe to the theory that they put the higher difficulties in to sell their DLC, like their grinding DLC. But that's just a tinfoil hat thing that I'm not sure about. But
It's a conspiracy theory.
those are the things that come to mind for me.
I feel like they just put it in there to allow for grinding, but I don't feel like it's designed assuming you grind for the most part. Especially on normal or hard, I've never felt compelled to grind. In Lunatic, sometimes I'm like, oh, this would be a lot easier if I grinded a bit. I do wonder if some of it had to do with, and I don't know because the game never came out in the West, but FE12 was pretty hard.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there were any complaints that like, oh, this game's really hard. It would be nice to have, easier opportunities to grind.
Thinking from like an accessibility standpoint too, and the other games that were coming out on the 3DS at that time, we had Bravely Default, we had Etrian Odyssey 4, we had a lot of JRPGs coming that had a lot of different ways to tackle it, whether like it was a classically hard game so you could have easier difficulty, you could reduce the number of encounters in some of the games. This was the first game where you could opt for no permadeath, so I'm wondering if like again it was built with this intention of, and again it also comes down to just not balancing the encounters, like ultimately that's what it comes down to late game, but I'm wondering if that was kind of the thought where, oh, how do we make this appealing for newer gamers, and kind of built it from the bottom up instead of the top down.
I think accessibility probably was something they were considering because there were a few games in a row where they added some features of that nature. In FE11, we got save tiles. Casual actually came in 12, although we never... In Awakening, we got casual for the first time in the West, but it was in 12. And then in Awakening, we got casual mode plus readily available grinding, and then in Fates, we had Phoenix mode. So it does feel like there was a trend of adding some features to make the games a bit more accessible if you struggle with them.
It might also just be that they sort of thought that grinding was a part of JRPGs in general, so it was more a matter of, do we include this thing that's going to be there in most of these games, or do we make an effort to exclude it almost? Like, it's reverse. And it could also be because they want you to grind up kits. There's an infinite leveling system in the game through second seals. Maybe people want to abuse that. There's also the spot pass system, which also allows you to grind. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I guess they just wanted to make leveling widely available, even if you hadn't been using it throughout the story.
Yeah, and I do know a few people that absolutely love being able to grind units to stupid high levels. So, I mean, it's a good feature for some people. And then, like, my understanding is for, like, the Apotheosis DLC that you kind of need to grind.
Yeah, you do. You do. I've been told.
I'm also wondering too, this was the last time we saw player phase enemy reinforcements, which are like the bane of everyone's existence because there's nothing you can do. Three Houses, that's true.
But only on Maddening, to be fair.
Well, and there's at least a way to forgive yourself on that because of the Divine Pulse mechanic, right?
True.
But like in this game, it just happens, and most of the time you can't deal with it. Again, I think there was probably a lot of issues that we saw refined in future entries, because I can tackle hard mode and have a pretty good time in Fates, and like not feel like I'm gonna almost full party wipe, or it comes down to like my main pair up to just slog through the entire game like it does in Awakening, where it's just basically Krabben taking everything down, because...
I mean fake, that's okay though.
Or fake. Well, I'm sorry, I have not done my own Awakening run, so soon though.
Recommend.
Soon. Maybe that's what will happen when we do the charity stream tomorrow.
I will say about ambush spawns that I feel like they were either like a late inclusion that they didn't really think about, or they did it with casual mode in mind, because it's so harsh compared to everything else that's in the game for your dancer to just go when you're like next to a stairway. It seems like way different from most of the things in this game.
Yeah, it feels really punishing in like an annoying way, because like I would say Fate's like Conquest hard mode I think of as like harder than Awakening hard mode, but Awakening hard's kind of more annoying because the ambush spawns are just kind of knowledge checks. It's like, did you remember that an enemy was going to spawn here? If not, reset.
Yeah, and they are like, they commonly have warnings, and when I look them up, I'm always like, oh, they're coming like turn 8? That's so late. Like, I'm already halfway done by the time, but not everyone is going to be done by that time.
Well, and also I feel like there are just a lot more tools to how you can approach the situations in Conquest. Like you have guard gauge, you can debilitate with ninjas. There's a lot more that goes on where I feel like you don't see that in Awakening. Like your one tool that you can use is truly just pairing everyone up. Like there's nothing really beyond that. So I'm sure that plays a part in it too.
Yeah, which I mean is a strong tool because I mean I could tell you often my answer to late game powerful ambush spawns is, well, if the only unit on the map is Robin, their backpack, and a Nosferatu, then I don't have to worry about ambush spawns.
Yeah, and like if you pair Olivia up, like she's not going to survive an enemy or anything, and if you pair her to the back, then she can't dance anyone. She might as well just not be on the field. So one thing that Awakening does give you that no other game in the series gives you is buyable rescue staves, which is an incredibly funny tool to toy with. Like no other game is willing to give you this early and then this like many of, which is like super fun. It's not super useful if you're just juggernauting through the whole map because I mean Vake has to walk all the way through anyway. He doesn't really care about going a little faster. But if you want to keep people safe, that is one funny thing you can do with the rescue staff. You can dance someone and then pull the dancer out of danger with the rescue staff, for instance, which is super helpful.
Yeah, I actually really like the buyable rescue staves because I feel like there's a lot of funny shenanigans you can do with them, and I find it more enjoyable than warp in most games. Because I feel like if you want to do a good rescue, you kind of have to work for it a little bit. Like you have to get the rescue staff or where you're trying to pull the unit, whereas like I love Arcanea, but you play an old Arcanea game and it's like, oh, all right, it's turn 1, I'm warping seated to the boss.
Well, and you never regret a rescue, but you may regret a warp, right? Like, it's not very often that you're rescuing someone and you regret the fact that you did that.
Sometimes. It has one drawback, like the Syrie chapter where you're supposed to save her from because she's in a corner with a bunch of Armor Knights trying to kill her, and she's just frantically using her elixirs to stay alive. Base level Anna can pull her out of danger turn 1 with a magic pair up, and it's like, okay, that's the chapter over with, basically.
Well, that was also, I remember in my last run of the game, I was getting really annoyed at the chapter where Maribel joins.
Yeah.
And you could do the same thing there. You could do a magic pair up with Lissa, and then she can just rescue.
Yeah, at least there's like a safe square you can put her for 1 turn, and then after that you can maneuver your way through. But again, yeah, the easier solution is just to use Rescue Lamau. And that one, it feels more deliberate, though.
Yeah, although you do have to play the... I think you have to play the Paralog, right? To get the rescue.
You get it from Donald's Paralog.
Oh, Donald. There's the real MVP of the game.
Yeah, also probably the real reason grinding is in it.
He, like, literally, typically for me, on that last map, it's Crom and Robin are alive, pairing up. Everyone else is gone, and Donald is just baiting everyone else for me and barely staying alive. God bless aptitude. Well, I think that probably wraps up our conversation on Awakening. And I know, Mecha, you probably won't be playing this game. Well, you'll be playing it tomorrow, I guess, but you won't be going back to this one for a little while, I'm sure now.
Yeah, I mean, at some point I'll probably replay it. It's just a game you need to put away for a little while between playthroughs. But I mean, that for me, I know there's people who play this game a lot. But for me, I like to switch it up between games. Yes.
And then Lizard, I know this is posting on Monday, right after your stream. But I'm sure what went into you deciding that this was going to be the game you were going to stream.
There were a few factors. One, I was replaying it and really enjoying my replay. 2, I wanted to pick a game. So there were like 2 games I was really enjoying at the time. I was really enjoying FE3 and I was really enjoying Awakening. And I was like, okay, we're not going to do FE3 for the stream. So Awakening felt like a good choice. It's a game people like. This was not my thought process at the time, but it kind of worked out. I feel like Awakening is a appropriate choice for a children's hospital fundraiser. So yeah, I mean, not a ton of thought went into it. I just picked the popular game that I was enjoying at the time.
I mean, I feel like we only can see Sacred Stones on stream so much, so I'm with you on that one. But yeah, well, I want to thank you guys for being here as usual. Mecha, is this your last one, or do I still get you for one more?
I thought I was on for one more. I have no idea.
Oh, you know what?
Echoes.
Yeah. So you'll be seeing Mecha. I think Bopper's back on deck, pulling him back out from the closet in a week or so, and then you'll see Mecha again for probably his last episode with us for Echoes. But again, I appreciate you both being here, and then again, I know this is going to be late, but good luck with the fundraiser tomorrow, Lizard. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing with you guys.
If you like listening and want to join the conversation, make sure you sound off on our Discord, our Twitter, or Instagram at RPGaymer. Also, make sure you head on over to Actual Lizard or Mecha and follow their content because they have some great things coming out. We want to thank you all for listening. Now go out there and get gaming.